Welcome, everyone. Whether you are frantically prepping for a meeting, commuting, or just, intensely curious to learn something completely new today, you are in exactly the right place.
You definitely are.
Today, we're opening up a stack of historical records, biographies, and localized frontier accounts centering on one of the most unbelievable figures of the American Wild West.
A figure that really defies all the typical frontier stereotypes.
Completely. I am talking about Alice Ivers Duffield Tubbs Huckert.
That is quite the full name.
It is, but you and history probably know her by a much punchier name. Poker Alice.
Right?
Imagine an English-born, highly educated boarding school girl who somehow transforms into a gun-toting, cigar-smoking poker legend.
Dominating the saloons of the frontier.
Exactly. It is an absolute must-hear story based on a Wikipedia article chronicling her life. And it's going to challenge everything you think you know about survival in the Wild West.
It really reframes the era.
It does. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the incredible and, frankly, sometimes baffling transformation of Alice Ivers. We want to extract the broader lessons from her life. Lessons about the psychology of high-stakes environments, the sheer grit required to survive, and how to navigate spaces that are fundamentally designed to keep you out.
Setting the stage here requires us to look past the caricature of the frontier gambler.
Right.
When we dig into the historical sources, it becomes really clear that Alice's trajectory wasn't just a matter of luck or, a penchant for adventure.
No, not at all.
It is a deeply fascinating case study in sociological maneuvering. Alice navigated and in many ways completely manipulated the intensely male-dominated, highly volatile spaces of the 19th century American West.
She really did.
She used every psychological and environmental tool at her disposal to maintain her independence in a world that offered zero safety nets for women on their own.
To understand the sheer scale of that manipulation, we have to look at her origins, which honestly could not be further from the dusty floors of a frontier saloon.
Right, they are night and day.
Think about the mid-19th century in England. That is the world she was born into, Devonshire, in 1851.
To Irish immigrant parents.
Yeah. And when Alice was a young girl, about 12 years old, the family crossed the Atlantic and settled in Virginia.
So she wasn't raised in a rough-and-tumble environment.
Far from it. She was sent to an elite boarding school specifically to be educated as a refined lady.
Which is such a contrast.
It's massive.
Yeah.
She was being prepped for drawing rooms and high society.
And the environmental whiplash she experiences next is crucial to her development.
Oh, definitely.
In her late teens, her family uproots again. This time, they follow the silver rush out west to Leadville, Colorado.
The culture shock must have been staggering.
It had to be. She goes from a structured, genteel Virginia boarding school to a booming, chaotic, dirt and dynamite mining town.
Leadville in those days was wild. Extreme transience, sudden wealth, sudden violence.
Exactly. And it is in this crucible that she meets a young man named Frank Duffield.
He was a mining engineer, right?
Yes, a mining engineer.
Yeah.
They marry, and in his spare time, Frank happens to be a poker player.
Ah.
So he teaches Alice the mechanics of the game.
He probably thought he was just teaching his refined wife a fun parlor trick to pass the time.
Most likely.
But the narrative takes a sharp, brutal turn here. Just a few years into their marriage, Frank is resetting a dynamite charge in a Leadville mine.
A really common but incredibly dangerous job.
Very. And the charge detonates early.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he is killed instantly. Suddenly, Alice is a young widow in a notoriously rough mining camp,
Utterly isolated.
with no primary source of income and no family safety net nearby.
What's fascinating here is the brutal reality of her financial desperation and how she responds to it.
Right.
The historical record shows she initially tried to survive through conventional, socially acceptable means. She attempted to find work as a school teacher.
Which aligns perfectly with her boarding school background.
It does. But the frontier didn't need refined teachers as much as it needed labor, and the pay was absolutely abysmal.
Yeah, the conventional paths for a widow to support herself were leading straight to starvation.
Exactly. So she faced a choice: retreat back east in defeat or adapt to the environment she was in.
And she chose the latter.
She took the parlor trick her late husband taught her and turned it into a weapon for survival.
And she didn't just scrape by either. She walked into those saloons and became an absolute powerhouse.
She dominated.
Let's look at the actual mechanics of her gameplay, because she wasn't just relying on the luck of the draw. Accounts from the era indicate she was exceptionally mathematically gifted.
Right, she was tracking everything.
She was counting cards and calculating odds in her head, all while sitting in poorly lit saloons surrounded by drunk, armed men.
It takes immense focus.
But the math was only half the equation. Her real genius was in psychological warfare.
The psychology of her strategy is brilliant. She recognized that poker is a game of human observation. You were playing the people at the table.
Yeah.
And Alice weaponized the societal norms of the era to create an immense psychological blind spot in her opponent.
She used her winnings, and we need to pause on this for a second. She was pulling in up to $6,000 in a single night.
Which is a fortune back then.
A total fortune. And she would take that cash, travel all the way from these rugged mining camps to New York City,
Right.
and buy the most lavish, cutting-edge fashion available.
The finest dresses.
Yes. Then she would wear those extravagant dresses straight to the poker tables.
Consider the cognitive dissonance she was engineering there.
It's wild.
You have miners and outlaws who are risking their lives in the dirt for maybe $3 a day.
Yeah.
They sit down at a table, and across from them is a woman dressed in high society New York fashion, looking completely out of place.
It scrambles their brains.
Exactly. They couldn't reconcile the image of a refined, vulnerable Victorian lady with the reality of a ruthless, mathematically precise card shark.
They didn't know what hit them.
She viewed these expensive dresses strictly as business investments. She was buying distraction.
And it worked.
Even well into her 50s, she utilized her appearance and fashion to throw men off their game, and they fell for it for decades.
It is a phenomenal paradox. She's sitting across from hardened outlaws, dressed like a socialite, counting cards and cleaning them out.
While leaning into the contradictions even further.
Oh, she leaned all the way in. She always carried a gun, specifically a .38 caliber revolver.
A frontier essential.
And she was known for constantly smoking cigars at the table. She even worked in Creede, Colorado at a saloon owned by Robert Ford.
The man who assassinated Jesse James.
Exactly. That is the caliber of grit we're talking about. Yet, amidst all this frontier chaos, she stubbornly enforced her own refined boundaries.
The Sunday rule.
Yes, she strictly refused to ever play poker on Sundays.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that Sunday rule was a masterstroke of branding.
Really? How so?
Well, in an environment that was practically lawless, enforcing a strict moral boundary made her an anomaly.
I see.
The saloon owners didn't push back on her refusal to work Sundays. In fact, they marketed it.
They turned it into a feature.
Exactly. Her insistence on maintaining the veneer of a respectable woman, combined with her cigar-smoking and gun-toting reality, turned her into a major attraction.
Men were lining up and paying good money just to sit at a table and be dismantled by this walking contradiction.
Precisely.
Think about how you present yourself in high-stakes situations in your own life. Do you try to blend in with the dominant culture, or do you amplify what makes you an outsider to throw your competition off balance?
It's a great question.
Alice amplified her contradictions so effectively that she claimed to have won around $250,000 over her career.
Which, adjusted for inflation, is over $3 million today.
Over $3 million.
And she did it all in spaces fundamentally designed to exclude her.
Incredible.
But her life wasn't just a clean, uninterrupted streak of victories at the card table.
No, the frontier required a toll.
Her personal life was marked by intense romance and profound tragedy.
Let's shift the timeline to around 1890 up in Deadwood, South Dakota. Alice is working as a dealer at Bedrock Tom's Saloon.
A classic frontier establishment.
A fellow dealer named Warren G. Tubbs is working a nearby table. Out of nowhere, a drunken miner pulls a knife and lunges at him.
Just explosive violence.
But Alice doesn't scream or run for the sheriff. She calmly draws her .38 revolver, levels it at the attacker, and threatens to drop him right there.
The ultimate de-escalation.
The miner backs down, Warren's life is saved, and a frontier romance is born. They actually end up getting married.
It is a really dramatic origin story for a marriage. But it is worth noting the friction in the historical record regarding their family life.
Oh, absolutely. Documenting the Wild West is often an exercise in piecing together contradictory local legends.
Exactly. Some sources assert that Alice and Warren had 7 biological children together.
Right.
While other historical accounts insist they had no children of their own, but rather that Alice brought a son and a daughter into the marriage from a previous undocumented relationship, and Warren just raised them.
The family history gets even stranger when you look at the footnotes. There is this bizarre tangent in the sources about her son, George.
George, who took the Tubbs name.
Yes. Fast forward decades later to 1934. George is 65 years old.
Right.
And he somehow ends up lying unconscious on a set of train tracks.
With a locomotive bearing down on him.
Exactly. And two local women miraculously spot him and drag him off the rails just seconds before the train hits.
It's one of those wild, almost unbelievable side stories.
It really shows just how chaotic the trajectory of this family was across multiple generations.
The drama certainly seemed to follow them. Returning to her marriage with Warren, the environment eventually caught up with them in a devastating way. Warren was a painter, and the prevailing theory is that the harsh chemicals he worked with severely compromised his lungs. It led to tuberculosis.
Awful.
As his health deteriorated, Alice shifted from saloon dealer to full-time caretaker.
She purchased a remote ranch on the Moreau River, roughly 100 miles from Sturgis.
Hoping the isolation and fresh air would cure him.
But the disease progressed. Warren passed away during a bitter winter storm on December 31st, 1909.
The aftermath of his death is one of the most harrowing displays of endurance in her entire biography.
It really is. He dies in the dead of winter at an isolated ranch, and Alice is entirely alone.
Completely isolated.
She is determined that he will have a proper Catholic funeral, which means getting him all the way to Sturgis.
A huge distance in those conditions.
So she wraps his body in heavy blankets. She loads him into the back of a freezing lumber wagon, hitches up a team of horses, and she sets out.
Wow.
She drives that wagon for 4 straight days through blinding snow and frozen trails.
4 days!
Completely alone in the freezing wilderness, transporting her husband's corpse.
The physical and psychological stamina required for that journey is almost incomprehensible.
It's staggering.
She manages to navigate the storm and delivers his body to Sturgis for the funeral. But the harsh realities of frontier economics didn't pause for mourning.
No, they did not.
The ranch and the medical care had drained her resources. She didn't have the funds to cover the burial costs. She couldn't afford to stop and grieve.
Right.
The moment the funeral was arranged, she traveled to Rapid City, walked into Blacknell's resort, and immediately took a job as a bartender to pay off the debt.
She simply did not allow herself to break. And that cold, hard pragmatism bled into every aspect of her life from that point on.
It became her default mode.
Here's where it gets really interesting. After Warren's death, she hires a man named George Huckert to work on her homestead.
Primarily tending to her sheep.
Right. And George falls completely in love with her. He starts proposing marriage on a regular basis.
And Alice just ignores him.
Completely ignores him. But eventually, the homestead hits a rough patch, and Alice falls behind on his wages.
She owes him money.
She ends up owing George exactly $1,008.
That's very specific.
Yes. So she looks at the ledger, runs the numbers, and she finally accepts his proposal.
Wow.
She married the man because it was literally cheaper than paying him the back wages she owed him.
It strips away all the romanticized Victorian notions of courtship we usually associate with that era.
It really does.
Out on the South Dakota plains, a marriage certificate could function as a debt settlement. It was a calculated, practical solution to a financial problem.
Pragmatism at its peak.
Huckert eventually passed away in 1924, leaving her a widow for the 3rd time.
Which brings us to the final and arguably the most explosive chapter of her life, the resort years.
Things really heat up here.
Alice eventually saved enough capital to purchase a piece of property situated right between Sturgis and Fort Meade along Bear Boot Creek.
She opened a sprawling establishment.
Yeah, it simply became known as Poker Alice's Resort. And this was not just a quiet back room for card games. By 1913, the tension surrounding her property hits a boiling point.
Because Fort Meade was an active military outpost, and the dynamic between the soldiers and the local frontier establishments was inherently volatile.
Right.
Alice, running a prominent resort, was frequently at odds with the enlisted men. In July of 1913, that tension fractured.
A group of soldiers from Troop K, accompanied by some National Guardsmen, approached her resort late at night.
Their explicit intention, according to testimonies, was to force entry and start a rough house.
But Alice refuses to be intimidated. She locks the heavy doors and denies them entry.
So the soldiers escalate the situation.
They start hurling stones, shattering the resort's windows.
And then they systematically cut the telephone and electrical wires leading to the building.
They plunge her into darkness and completely sever her ability to call the local sheriff for help.
She is trapped, isolated, and under siege by the military.
But they wildly miscalculated her response. Alice doesn't hide. She retrieves her firearm, steps into the chaos, and opens fire into the dark.
She fires 5 rounds.
She hits 5 men.
Wow.
She severely wounds a soldier named Joseph C. Minor, and she strikes Private Fred Koetzel in the head, killing him.
The aftermath is an absolute legal circus.
I can only imagine.
The authorities arrive, and Alice, along with 6 women working at her resort, Jenny, Bessie, Ann, Bertie, Mabel, and Edith, are immediately arrested and thrown into the Meade County Jail.
Right.
The state's attorney launches a homicide investigation into the death of Private Koetzel. However, when examining the broken glass, the cut wires, and the testimonies, he concludes that Alice acted entirely in self-defense.
She was protecting her property and her life from a violent, coordinated mob.
Exactly. He clears her of all murder charges.
But the local authorities don't just let her walk back to her resort, do they?
Not at all. This is where we see the systemic hypocrisy of the era's legal code.
Yeah.
The authorities couldn't convict her of murder because frontier law heavily favored property defense. However, they had her in a jail cell, and they wanted her operation shut down.
So they pivot their strategy.
They used the raid as an excuse to charge her with operating a house of ill fame, essentially a brothel.
They used moral legislation to punish her when the criminal legislation failed to stick.
Exactly.
And that sets the tone for her twilight years. She is constantly battling the law. 2 years later, in 1915, there is another shootout at the resort involving soldiers,
Which the press dismissively writes off as a booze fight.
Then the 1920s arrive, bringing prohibition. Her resort becomes a target for federal and local agents.
In 1924, she gets raided and busted for bootlegging.
And in 1925, she is raided again and hit with another prostitution conviction.
By 1928, the compounding legal fees and convictions finally cornered her. She was facing a lengthy sentence in the state penitentiary.
But she was in her late 70s.
Right. Her health was rapidly deteriorating, and the prospect of prison was essentially a death sentence.
But the community dynamics at play here are fascinating. She was a convicted bootlegger and brothel operator, yet she wasn't treated like a pariah.
Not at all.
The citizens of Sturgis rally around her. Hundreds of locals sign a petition and deliver it to South Dakota Governor William J. Bulow.
Pleading for clemency based on her age and pioneer status.
Exactly. And on December 20th, 1928, the governor relents and grants her a pardon.
The state backs down, and Alice finally retires from the vice trade.
The petition really illustrates the dual nature of her legacy.
It does. The town recognized her as a lawbreaker, but they also recognized her as an architectural pillar of their own history.
She had survived the mud of Leadville, outsmarted outlaws at the poker table, and braved blizzards to bury her dead.
They couldn't stomach the idea of that resilience rotting in a concrete cell.
So what does this all mean? How does the saga of Poker Alice finally close?
In early 1930, at the age of 78, Alice required a gallbladder operation in Rapid City.
Given her age and the medical standards of the time, the prognosis was grim.
She fought through the initial surgery and showed brief signs of recovery, but her body finally gave out. She passed away on February 27, 1930, and was buried at St. Aloysius Cemetery in Sturgis.
Yet she managed to execute one final, calculated play from beyond the grave.
She absolutely did.
When her will was executed, it shocked her surviving family. She completely disinherited all of her blood relatives.
All of them.
Her stated reason in the legal documents was that they had ignored her and failed to support her during her declining, vulnerable years.
Instead, she liquidated her estate and divided every penny among the loyal friends who had actually stood by her.
She demanded respect until her last breath, rewarding loyalty and financially punishing those who dismissed her.
It is the ultimate encapsulation of her worldview. To summarize the breadth of Alice Ivor's life is to observe a woman who fiercely refused to be boxed in by any single label.
Right.
Society tried to mold her into a refined Virginia lady, but she evolved into a mathematically lethal gambler.
She was a devoted caretaker who risked her own life in a blizzard for her husband's dignity. Yet she was also a ruthlessly pragmatic boss who married an employee just to balance her financial ledger.
She weaponized high fashion to blind her enemies and defended her property with a revolver in the dark.
She looked at a world that gave her terrible odds and systematically built her own rulebook to beat the house.
This raises an important question. Poker Alice used the strict societal expectations of her time as a smokescreen to achieve total independence. In our modern world of constant information and personal branding, what rigid rules or expectations are you blindly following, and how could you subtly rewrite them to play your own winning hand?